We'll get started. So again, thank you everybody for joining. My name is Chris Bruni. I'm the Vice President of Sales for Security Health Plan, joined by my esteemed colleague as co-host, Jeff Tucker. He is the Vice President of Business Development and Innovation for the Marshfield Clinic Health System. This is another webinar in the series that is co-sponsored by Security Health Plan and Marshfield Clinic Health System. And this is a special edition geared towards the children and families as you are going back to school. So we wanted to bring these three wonderful doctors back today. Again, they were on last week talking to the educators about a very similar topic, going back to school. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for a few comments to introduce our speakers, and we will let them get started.
Thanks, Chris. Well, you already updated them that this is part of a two-part series. This came out of requests that we received from you. So just a reminder that we build these webinars based on your feedback. We read every single comment. There's a lot that come in on Chris Bruni. He's got a huge fan base. He's kind of SHP's version of Taylor Swift. Everyone adores him. Today's webinar is entitled Supporting Your Child's Mental Health Needs, Returning to School During COVID. Presenters will be Dr. Allison Jones, child and adolescent psychiatrist, Dr. Myra West, clinical psychologist, and Dr. Erica Larson, child and adolescent psychiatrist. They'll touch on recognition of stress in ourselves and children, starting conversations about emotions and mental health, specific concerns such as masks and transitions and disrupted routines, specific concerns regarding impact of trauma history, virtual learning, and physical distancing. And my kitten is reaching around on my monitor right now. Sorry, a little distracting. Squirrel. Self-care and coping strategies, and resources and community partnerships. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Larson.
Thank you very much. So I'm Dr. Larson. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist here at Marshfield Clinic, and I have Dr. Allison Jones with me and Dr. Myra West. So we are going to talk with you today about supporting the mental health needs of students. There we go. All right. So the first thing that we'll talk about is just the impact of traumatic stress and disasters. So disasters and stress can really impact a child's physical environment as well as their mental health. The pandemic has certainly placed enormous demands on children, parents, schools regarding safety, protective gear, physical distancing, the virtual learning, at-home learning. It's really an unpredictable situation for some and a significant amount of change. There's a lot of loss of control. So experiences will be very different for every person. And individuals will have different stressors. There's various reactions and emotions that could be observed as everyone returns to learning. For some people, it really could be exciting, viewed as a welcomed positive thing. Others, it could be frightening. There could be a number of other concerns. There might be really a mix of emotions. So some people might do well with that, and others might be in a real difficult situation and have a number of emotions that they're kind of struggling to manage. So our entire community really needs to work together during this time to support each other and to support our children. So one of the ways that Marshfield Clinic and SHP can do that is to do things like this, to provide various tips and help for you and your children to navigate some of these complex emotions and situations that everybody is confronted with. So one of the things, like I had mentioned, there's a variety of reactions and responses that we're seeing, lots of emotions that people are experiencing. So it's important to be able to recognize some of the stress responses that might occur. One of the ways to do that is really to identify difficulty and be able to provide some of the additional support when that's needed. Some kids might not talk openly about what they're feeling and their emotions. So recognizing the signs of distress and when they need support can be really helpful. One of the things to look for in very young children, you might see more irritability, there might be more crying, they want to be maybe held or cuddled more. There's a potential for regressive behaviors that you might notice. More toileting difficulty, there could be bedwetting, difficulty with separation from caregivers that might not be noticed before, more tantrums or difficulty sleeping. And a lot of this stuff, while typical for very young children. If it's a change from their baseline, that's when it's a little bit more concerning. And again, in older children, recognizing that there could be sadness, anger, there could be fear, and even importantly, as they return to needing to learn, focus and concentration issues. Physical complaints might also be something that you recognize. Headaches, stomach aches, changes in appetite. Sometimes for children and adolescents, it's a little bit easier for them to express physical complaints rather than their emotions and emotional struggles. So that would be something to pay attention to as well. There may be a desire to talk about some of these things by some kids, or they might attempt to avoid these conversations altogether. In older adolescents, some of the things that you could look out for could be more acting out. They might be afraid to leave home, isolate from friends and family. They could feel overwhelmed, feel like they're unable to talk about this to others. In certain situations, they may be ready to leave home and not want to be home as much. I know that there's a lot of struggle with not being able to do activities that people were being able to do. There could be more arguing, fighting with family, siblings, and even friends. So more peer discord could be noted. In regards to other populations that we should consider too, there might be more intense distress and stronger reactions such as worry, anxiety, especially if there's a previous trauma history or other things that could have happened in the past. They might feel like they have even less control and might need extra reassurance and more explanations about the event, what's happening and changes, as well as needing maybe some additional comfort. So starting conversations about these emotions and distress that we're observing is really critical to providing necessary support and being able to help children as they return to learning. So how do we do that? How do we start some of these discussions? One of the key things to do is really be able to provide the opportunities. I mean, that's a first step is being able to, for children to know that you're open for conversation and encouragement, and that they're able to share some of these concerns and feelings and ask questions. So encouraging them and letting them know it's natural to feel a lot of these things right now. And it can be really helpful if they talk about it. So you're there for them to do that. Answering questions honestly builds trust and reassures the child that they can really rely on you for some of this information. So providing some explanations that are really age appropriate, so using language that they can understand, that'll help them feel more informed about the situation. Be prepared though to repeat some of these explanations, maybe even several times, and answer questions that they may ask multiple times. Some of the information could be really difficult for them to understand and grasp. And another thing to think about is that they may not want to accept some of the information that you're giving them. So they may ask, hoping for a different answer. So it's really important to just kind of answer honestly and keep calm and just repeat some of the things that you've already told them. Validating some of the feelings and showing appreciation that they're making efforts to connect and engage. That's really important as well. Some of the examples of ways that you might start the conversation with them regarding some of the emotions and feelings, if you're recognizing some of the things that I talked about earlier, phrases such as, I'm worried about you, I'm here for you, can we talk about what's going on with you? Those would be things that are more, or maybe more open-ended and could elicit a better response from them. And checking in with them intermittently, so reminding them that our emotions and our feelings are going to change. The situation's changing so rapidly, so are emotions and feelings and what they may be expressing. And that's okay. It's okay for things to change. So let's talk about that frequently and just make sure to check in with them. Discussing positives can also be helpful. So having conversations about what we can control and directing them towards things that may be ways to appropriately express some of the emotions with other activities. And we'll talk more about that later on in the presentation too. It can be a great way to discuss feelings, some of the positive activities, and manage some of them. So we're going to talk a little bit more about management of stress, a little bit more detail here. And it's important to kind of recognize some of this stuff in yourself because children really do take emotional cues from adults around them. So how adults manage emotion and stress is really important. Modeling is very critical for the well-being of children. Being calm, confident, and reassuring is going to go a long way with them. So with all of the stress and emotions we're feeling and things that we're dealing with, how as adults do we manage some of this stuff? Using self-care strategies is one of the ways that we can help with those stress responses in ourselves. It's something that we can implement and help, with what we're dealing with, but also teach our children, because they can follow along with some of the things that we can do for ourselves. So practicing self-compassion, understanding that even as adults, we experience a range of emotions. A sense of loss of control, again, lots of anxiety, maybe worry about things such as exposure, making correct decisions for our kids. There's a number of demands placed on all of you during this time. So recognizing that that can really be overwhelming for most adults. Checking in with yourself frequently too, just as you're checking in with your children, monitoring some of the symptoms that we talked about before and signs of stress. So things that maybe you recognize that had been signs in the past in yourself, or things that you could anticipate maybe being something that would indicate you're getting overwhelmed. Those would be things to monitor for. And using social supports as adults. So we're physically distanced, but we can continue to connect socially in a variety of ways. So getting creative with that. Other strategies that we can recommend would be sleeping well, eating well, getting lots of physical activity, meditating, engaging in enjoyable activities, things that you find pleasurable, connecting with nature, your faith, community, whatever you find to be able to calm and really rejuvenate you. And being safe and following recommended guidelines too. So being familiar with what that looks like and steps that you can take to reduce your own risk and the risk of others that are around you. Knowing locations that you can go to provide facts and reliable information, accurate information. Places like the CDC, the World Health Organization, Marshfield Clinic Center for Community Advancement, and we'll provide some of these links and resources at the end of the presentation so that you all have them. There'll be a list and we'll go through some of those. So we'll talk a little bit more about managing stress responses, but more in detail specifically related to children. Tips for calming, self-regulating, coping with school stressors as you all return to learning. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. West to talk a little bit more about that portion.
Good afternoon. I've had some technological difficulties, so I am just joining everyone as well. But thank you for joining us today. So I am Myra West, and I am a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma. And so we wanted to provide a couple of tips for all of you as we're returning to school and have returned to school over the past week and a half or so. But as we talk about preparing kids so that they can regulate and soothe and calm themselves, one of the best ways that we can help them to regulate is also to prepare the teacher for our children. And so some of the things that we can share with the teacher might be various health conditions that your child may be dealing with, whether it's diabetes or asthma, or whether they need an inhaler or not, so that they can have that information and the teacher can then be able to respond more appropriately to the child to help them regulate in the moment. Some of the other things that would, of course, be important for the teacher to know are any sorts of family issues that might be going on. So whether it's divorce, remarriage, a death in the family, if there's been a move or anything along those lines, so that the teacher can also keep that in mind if there is any sort of distress is exhibited by the kids. Personality traits or behavioral concerns. So obviously parents know their kids better than anyone else. So if you can prepare the teacher with some key pieces of information about your children, that can be very beneficial for them. And even thinking about strengths and weaknesses they might have, like perhaps they love math, but they're horrible at science, or they dread science and they just don't want to do it. So kind of tipping the teacher off to that as well. Thinking about their learning style, and do they like things to be demonstrated for them? Do they like to have an explanation that's more verbal? what is most beneficial for them, and if parents have also kind of learned what works best with their child, sharing that with the teacher. And what kind of study habits that they might have, and what types of assignments can be beneficial, and how that child can best respond to those assignments and be successful with them. And then, of course, any kind of special interests or hobbies that the child might have, which can provide some opportunities for the teacher to connect with your child in the room. Again, just supporting more of that preparation and then the regulation of the child, and hopefully will also help the teacher with regulation. And we talked about that last time as well, that some of the activities that can be done with the kids can also be done by the teacher and implemented by the teacher to kind of really help everyone have a little reset. Can I get the next slide, please? Thank you. So thinking about self-regulation, and what is self-regulation? So when we're working with kids and they start to become distressed, self-regulation is a way that they can calm their bodies and attempt to respond to a situation without having very big emotions. So thinking of ways that we can prepare them for that in advance. And so what does dysregulation look like? So sometimes we can see that as kids really struggling to sit still. We may have some behavioral presentations going on. They may become very distressed. Their bodies may be seeming that they're a little less likely to control them in the moment. And obviously even hearing louder voices and concerns related to something that has really upset or possibly triggered them. It's causing a reaction in the classroom or somewhere at school, and needing a child to be able to cue into that, but also to help support them in that regulation. So speaking calmly to them and waiting for them to sort of have an opportunity to calm and soothe themselves to some extent without being pressured, which can, of course, increase dysregulation. Why do some of our kids struggle with dysregulation and others may not? Great question, right? And we know that some of it can be related to temperament. Some of it can also be related to learned behaviors, things they have learned in their environment, whether that's home or school or neighborhood, community. But so thinking about that and what their exposure might be, and that is how they've learned to cope when they become distressed. So how can we teach them to self-regulate? Well, sort of like we do any other academics or steps that we take to try to really help children learn and build a process, and breaking it down into smaller steps so that they can build on their successes from the smaller steps and sort of set up a scaffolding system where they can build on that little by little. But again, with each little step, there is support and recognition for their successes. And so practice runs can even be done to try to help kids practice these skills. So if there's a child that really struggles in stores, and so you go grocery shopping and they become very upset and want to touch everything and want to put it in the cart, a way to practice that would be to go into the store for a very brief trip. Maybe you only need one item, but preparing the child prior to entering the store and saying, I want you to walk by me and I want you to keep your hands to yourself. And we're just going to go in really quickly, get this thing and come back out. And setting them up for that and encouraging them, praising them while you're walking through the store, and then leaving, hopefully, without a tantrum. But so just these little steps and breaking it down a little bit. And the more they practice them and have success and then continue to utilize those skills, the more they will begin to learn how to manage their own self-regulation. Also, helping them become self-reflective and thinking about, all right, this is what happened and what went wrong here if there had been a significant upset or distress. So what happened? What could be done differently? What was it that upset the child or triggered them to really set them off and become so dysregulated? And talking about it at a time when everyone is calm and the event has passed, maybe even a day or two later, depending on their age, of course, and what they can and can't retain, but really talking it through with them so that they can also have a little bit of connection and involvement to this process. And next slide, please. So how can we help them calm? What can we do so that we can encourage these skills in the kids themselves rather than them relying on others to help them regulate and calm? So one of the things that we can do is to try to rethink emotions. And we know that emotions, especially the negative ones, can build over time. And so by learning what they feel like in their bodies, naming them, and then accepting them so that they are more informed and educated, even how they respond in certain situations. And so if they can notice it and label it before it gets too big, then we're able to talk about that and find other ways to possibly minimize or prevent those negative emotions from getting bigger and bigger. And sometimes as adults and parents, we really want kids to be happy, right? We want them to have positivity in life and just enjoy childhood. So sometimes, even though it's very unintentional, we can inadvertently put pressure on kids to try to focus on happy. And I think, anyone who talks to a child about feelings, a lot of times they'll say sad, mad, scared, happy. That's about it. And so when we really think about the amount of feelings and emotion words that are out there, it can be overwhelming. But to really try to help kids understand the differences, and of course, the older they get, hopefully the more that they're able to do that. Even modeling, managing different emotions. And so one of the suggestions is to name your own feeling. If as adults and parents, we are feeling frustrated, name that, but also use it on a scale of 1 to 10. And so you can even communicate with the child that, wow, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now, or I'm feeling very frustrated. And I'd say it's about a 4, but I could see it getting to a 7 very quickly. And so thinking about and preparing them ahead of time to teach them about this scale and encouraging them to use their words when they start to feel and notice changes in their bodies. Of course, validating feelings. It's acknowledging and accepting how they are feeling. It's not agreement that, if they're upset because they're not getting their way, validating those feelings is not the same as saying that they're right and that they should get their way. So really that sort of fine line, it just shows them that listening to them when we can acknowledge that they are very frustrated. Of course, active ignoring is a pretty common one. The positive attention, we just can't emphasize the praise and attention when we're seeing the behaviors that we really want to see. Clear expectations. Here we're talking again about preparation, really focusing on what the routines are, clear and short steps or instructions, giving warnings or notice if something needs to wind up in a few minutes, and of course, dependent on age and developmental levels, 5, 10, sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 1 minute can even be a little tough, but I'll count down with the younger kids just to kind of keep them updated. I'm giving options, of course, so choices of, well, you can have milk or water today. Which would you like? This is the option for now. Making sure, of course, that they're choices that you are okay with. But that what that does is it also gives children a feeling of they are involved and they have some control in making their choice rather than just it being dictated to them. You are having milk today. And sometimes that needs to happen depending on what's going on. But choices can usually help to avoid the increase in dysregulation if it can be caught in time. And I talked about preparation last week and again this week. And so coping ahead is another form of preparation. So planning in advance, if we think that something is about to happen that could be stressful. And then again, I mentioned it on the prior slide, but problem solving and looking back at what happened and talking it through about how things can be done differently. 5 special minutes a day. So finding out, is there just 5 minutes of direct one-on-one attention from you to the kids can mean so much to them. Sometimes I think we just get so busy and kind of caught up in trying to manage everything that's going on. So even just 5 minutes, and they get it no matter what. It doesn't mean if they've had a bad day and had some behaviors, had some difficulty regulating. This is not any kind of, it's not tied to any sort of behavior. It is just a special opportunity to be alone with a parent, and each parent can do that just to support the kids. And it gives them something to look forward to. Well, next slide, please. So also wanted to give some tips for homework. And so we have talked a lot about routines. Obviously, homework routines are extremely important. So thinking about how can we set up the homework area for the kids to be as successful as possible. So having a designated area for them to do their work can be extremely beneficial for them, and it can also help their focus. So having an actual area for them to do their work, an actual time for it to be done, also sets some of that structure, routine, and guidelines that we've been talking about. Thinking about even homework center, making sure everything is available for them in that area, and having a schedule. Maybe there's one subject they really love to do, and that can really get them engaged in jumping into homework time if they have something assigned for that subject that particular night. Incentive systems, so reward systems, of course. I've been saying symptoms too many times today, I think. So obviously, we want them to be motivated. There are some simple incentives like a fun activity when homework is done. It might be a little, some sort of YouTube video, TV show, something that you would be okay with allowing them to do. And even for a briefer time, if it is a television show and you don't want them having that much time, maybe it's a portion for right now. Some of the more elaborate systems can be used to address any kind of problems that might be coming up with homework. And so these could be and should be saved for some of the bigger projects. But it could be some sort of reward that they get, whether it's a purchase of some sort, even if it's a minimal purchase. I've had parents who use the Kinder Joy treats because it's a little snack, but there's also a toy in it, and that is not an expensive item. So even thinking about that, identifying what the kids really like and what will help them remain motivated. Building in breaks, of course, is essential if they're struggling and having a hard time. Maybe getting a drink of water, just kind of setting a timer so that they can get up and just walk around a little bit and then return back. And of course, the building in choice, which we talked about a few minutes ago, that can really give them a sense of ownership and engagement with the activities if they feel that they're able to set some of the standards. Let's see, so to develop the incentive systems, we want to identify what the problem behaviors are and set realistic goals for the kids. And again, thinking in smaller steps and building on this so that they can learn it and get it solidified before moving on to the next step and having some of that scaffolding. Working together to figure out what are possible rewards or consequences. Penalties is used in the article that we reference, and yeah, that sounded a little harsh to me. I prefer a consequence if necessary, but also there is a possibility of writing a homework contract that you and the child can set up together. And there was a link, and it is included in references as well, so that if you are interested in seeing what it is, it's a 2-page document. And obviously for some of the older kids, that could be something that they also feel empowered by if there is an agreed upon sort of plan that they can see and touch and sign their name on if necessary. So I will turn it over to Dr. Jones now, and we'll keep on rolling.
Ooh. There we go. Is that better? Okay. So transition can be difficult, right? We know that most kids have not been in an educational setting for the last 6 months. So going back at this time, really looking at that transition back into the school, just like, you know, any other transition. So from into kindergarten or into middle school from elementary school or into high school from middle school, but at an amplified amount. So parents and children may be experiencing greater levels of anxiety and stress related to the change in usual back to school routine. So I'm highlighting some of those emotions. They may experience that sadness that the typical routine of going and meeting the teachers and going to back to school night is not the same as it used to be. Children and parents may feel nervous or worried about contracting and spreading COVID-19 at school. They may feel excitement about going back to school and the new opportunities that will exist in the classroom. They may feel frustration by the vague kind of plans of school and what will happen in the differences in different communities. Or they may feel some skepticism of whether children are able to follow social distancing and masking protocols. So lots of different emotions as we look towards returning to school. Next slide. It's important as we start to return to school, as Dr. Larson and Dr. West mentioned, that we continue to be calm, confident, and informed role models for our children. Children and teens react in part on what they see from adults around them. So when parents and caregivers deal with the COVID-19 stress calmly and confidently, they can provide the best support for their children. Parents can be more reassuring to others around them, especially children, if they are better prepared. So it's important to have open and honest, factual conversations with your children about COVID-19 and its implications for returning to school. It's important to be rational and accurate with the information that you do talk about, and information from reliable sources. Consider taking in doses of news rather than checking it constantly. Limit your family's exposure to news coverage of the event or of COVID-19 in general, including social media. So children may misinterpret what they hear and can be frightened about something that they don't understand. Answer questions and share facts in a way that children can understand, using words or terms that they're more familiar with. There's even some good videos on Netflix or YouTube that talk more in terms that children are able to understand. Encourage students, as I previously stated, to learn and take breaks from learning about COVID. Promote healthy eating habits, exercise, good sleep routine, and downtime, both school-related and in general. As we've all mentioned, and it seems to be kind of a common theme that I'm sure you've heard across the different aspects of healthcare, but sticking with the routine is going to be very important for your kids. And knowing too that at the same time, there may be adjustments to be made as we progress through the school year. Continue to engage in meaningful activities with your children, whether that's family game night or exercising or reading together. That time that we have related to some extra downtime should be really meaningful. Encourage your students to talk with, or your children to talk with people that they trust, whether that's family members or teachers or other adults in the community. Have them reach out to people that they feel can really be on their side. Continue to safely connect with family and friends and be a good role model for your kids, and as they watch you connect with family and friends. Let them know that it's okay to feel upset. Upset is an emotion. It's okay to feel that emotion. Understand the availability of mental health services within the school and within the community. Knowing that really taking the time for you and for your children to engage in the mental health resources that they may need. And reach out if help is needed. We'll provide some resources at the end, but the schools will also have resources to help if there are kids that need additional support. Next slide, please. If there are days from home from school, as Dr. West had talked about, continue that structure. Just like in the classroom, continuing that structure on a regular basis. Setting regular bedtimes and wake-up times can be very helpful. Establishing a school day educational routine or schedule and really having your children engage in setting that up with you can allow them to take some ownership of that schedule and time. Incorporate practical life skills into learning. So kind of the Montessori model of learning and really using cooking and building or cleaning into the education that your children are receiving. As we previously have mentioned as well, continuing to exercise and maintain appropriate social contact. Next slide, please. So if we really get to the nitty-gritty, of the home routine, waking up, getting dressed, and having breakfast at a normal time, deciding where everyone can do their work most effectively and without distractions, whether that's in the same room or in separate rooms. List the times for learning, exercising, and taking breaks. For younger children, that might mean 20 minutes of class assignments with 10 minutes of physical activity or some other type of break. For older children and teens, they might be able to focus on assignments for longer stretches of time, but taking breaks between assignments. It also can be really helpful if you include your hours in the schedule. So if you're working from home, or if you're going to be going in and coming back home from work, or if you have other meetings or different things that you need to be doing, including your hours so that your children know when your workday is done. Making sure that you schedule time for nutritious lunches and snacks. Many schools are providing take-home school meal packages for students who need them. So really encourage scheduling that time into your day. Don't forget about afternoon breaks. Oftentimes we can kind of push yourself through the afternoon, and then for a child, really that 3 to 4 hours of time can be quite a long stretch. So making sure you're taking some time in the afternoon as well. Consider discussing the day over dinner. So if the family can sit down and have a meal together, maybe making the meal together, having a conversation about how everyone's day went. What were some things that went well? What were some things that didn't go so well? And then as I talked about, kind of maybe whether that's reading, watching a movie, watching some of the sporting events that are coming back, considering scheduling that time into your routine so that it's not missed. And then sticking with your normal bedtime routine as much as possible so that everyone makes sure that they get enough sleep. Next slide. One question that parents might be asking is about screen time. So with the virtual learning and the virtual conferences and the virtual gaming and social time, should I be worried about all this extra screen time that my kid is getting right now? While limits are still really important, it's understandable that under these stressful circumstances and really unique circumstances, that kids' screen media use will likely increase. So some ways to think about this would be to contact teachers about educational online and offline activities that your children should do. Considering having the school print out or printing out activities that can be done at home. Preschool teachers may not have an online curriculum to share, but some options might include PBS Kids that is sending out kind of a daily newsletter to help kids and show activities and other ideas that can be done at home. So lots of kids are on social media. Use social media for good. Maybe check in with neighbors, friends, or loved ones, or other elderly individuals in the community. If schools are closed, maybe there's ways that your student or your child can reach out and help people in need, whether that's for meals or for other raking leaves as we approach the fall, or shoveling, or doing something else for people in the community, and really using that social media for good. Also using the social media as a connection, right? As it really is intended. Social distancing and isolation can be isolating, as the word describes. If your kids are missing their school friends or other family, try video chats, social media to stay in touch. Again, when is it too much, and when can it be more helpful? Choose quality content and use trusted sources to find it. Use media together. Okay, so this is a great opportunity to monitor what your older children are seeing online and follow what your children are learning. Even watching a family movie together can help everyone relax while you appreciate the storytelling and meaning that movies can bring. Take your children virtually to work. So if you're working from home, is there a chance that you could bring your child into your world for a few hours even to show them kind of what you do and what it means to be working from home and what that looks like as an adult? Ultimately, limits are still important. As always, technology use should not push out time needed for sleep or physical activity, reading, or other family connections. Make a plan about how much time kids can play video games with friends or chat with friends online, and where their devices will be kept at night. Next slide. So lastly, we'll talk just a little bit about why masks are so important. We've had a lot of questions about mask exemptions and what that looks like for schools. So cloth-based coverings are recommended as a simple barrier to help prevent respiratory droplets from traveling into the air and onto other people when the person wearing the cloth-based covering coughs, sneezes, talks, or raises their voice. Cloth-based coverings are an example of source control. So when used consistently and correctly, along with other important mitigation strategies, cloth face coverings are important to help slow the spread of COVID-19. Next slide. So the CDC, as you probably have heard throughout healthcare and school and everywhere else, recommends that people wear masks in public settings and when around people who don't live in the same household, especially when other social distancing measures are difficult to maintain. So masks may help people prevent people who have COVID-19 from spreading the virus to others. They are most likely to reduce the spread of COVID-19 when they are widely used by people in public settings. Masks should not be worn by children under the age of 2 or anyone who has trouble breathing, is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the mask without assistance. Masks should also not be worn if they are wet. Next slide. Ultimately, masks should be considered in most situations. So they're still recommended with children that have a disability or other childhood mental health conditions or other concerns, including tactile sensitivity or sensory processing difficulty. And they would be recommended if they are receiving even one-to-one services or instruction within the school. Times when maybe we would really have to look into whether the mask would be necessary or should be used if there is severe asthma or other breathing problems, but also in students that are deaf or hard of hearing or rely on lip reading. Okay, and so that would be for both the student as well as for the teacher. Are there other options? Okay, so the plastic face shields are not recommended. However, there are some masks that have been clear and do show the mouth. Okay, so is that an option for some of these populations? Next slide. So masks in school. So the focus in school should still be on the education and promotion of positive relationships. Okay, so we're still focused on educating the children and keeping them safe and keeping the communities that we live in safe. So the use of cloth face coverings in educational settings may present some challenges, right? So for students that are younger, especially under maybe grade 2 or 3, there might have more difficulty. Or if the students have special healthcare needs, like we talked about, whether that's breathing conditions. Additionally, there may be, there's a little box that popped up there. There may be some students that have other special educational needs. These may present some more challenges, whether that's to the teachers or to the student themselves. Teachers of students who are English language learners may have more difficulty because of the mouth movements. And then also really thinking about masking in different environments. Okay, so whether that's on the bus, at recess, in the lunchroom or cafeteria when kids are eating, and in gym or physical education class. Next slide. So while we continue to focus on the overall use of masking in school and the importance that holds and really trying to work with children and teachers to find ways that they can ultimately wear their masks on a consistent basis, there are also other mitigation strategies. Okay, appropriate social distancing when possible, washing hands regularly. That would include before and after putting masks on, when touching the mask, and then also regular cleaning and disinfecting of frequently touched areas. Next slide. So there are some possible unintended consequences of masking. So does this segregate kids that have a medical condition if they're unable to wear a mask? Does it lead to the possibility of discrimination or bullying if kids are unable to wear masks? And so that's where I really encourage folks to really work on practicing wearing masks, even if it is meaning, you know, a couple minutes a day to reduce the anxiety about wearing the mask, to reduce the sensory processing difficulties that the individual might have. Not all families will agree with school policies about cloth-based coverings. So does this promote some difficulty in difficult conversations between friends? The importance is really going to be that the teachers, the staff, the parents are normalizing wearing masks in different settings. Next slide. Some other practical recommendations. So we're back to school now, but including cloth face coverings on school supply lists, including clear face coverings if there are children that are hard of hearing, if they're English language learners, or rely on lip reading. Ensure that students are aware of the correct use of cloth face mask or cloth face coverings, including cloth face coverings over the nose and mouth and securely around the face. Ensuring that students, teachers, and staff are aware that they should wash or sanitize their hands before putting on cloth face coverings. Ensuring that students, teachers, and staff are aware that they should not touch their cloth face covering while wearing them. And if they do, they should wash their hands before and after with soap or in water or sanitize hands. Ensuring teachers and staff are aware that they should wash or sanitize hands before and after helping a student put on their mask or adjust their mask. Ensuring that all students and staff are aware that cloth face coverings should not be worn if they are wet. And ensuring that all students and staff are aware that they should never share or swap face coverings. That they should maybe identify their masks with names or initials to avoid confusion and swapping of masks. Student face coverings may also be labeled to indicate the top and bottom or the front and the back. And then ensuring that cloth face masks are stored in a space designated for each student, whether that's in lockers or special cubbies. And that masks should really be washed every day or after every day of use and before wearing them again, or if visibly soiled. Next slide. So at home, as we talked about, teaching the use of cloth face mask coverings or masks, I should say. So really encouraging and reinforcing the appropriate use of these in public. Wearing masks for short periods of time throughout the day. Before the start of school, I have encouraged kids to maybe start wearing 5 minutes an hour and increasing that time over the weeks before school starts. Now that it's started, if there is still difficulty, possibly wearing it for short periods of time at the end of the day or on the weekends. And then really supporting school changes and rules. As we talked about, the children and students hear what you're saying and they hear what is said when they're not listening also. And so making sure that even if it's something that we don't necessarily agree with, that, you know, as a parent, that we're really trying to support those changes as best as possible. I think that's it.
All right, thank you all. So I just wanted to go through some resources too, just so everyone has some information for additional places that they can go for more support or additional information. We've included this in the presentation and this will be posted online as well. So there's just some information on where to go for immediate help, so crisis information, and then we also have information here for how to find a more intensive treatment if that is needed. For instance, contacting Marshfield Clinic, behavioral health and psychiatry, psychology for help for need for more intensive services. And then some of the other things here that we have on this is just some additional resources, different places that you can go for coping information. And you can click on those links or type that in. There's another book series that Dr. West had talked about in our previous webinar that we had done, the Little Spot book series. That can be a good resource for everyone. And just some other things here that I think Dr. West had pointed to as well. And I just want to see if I can bring up especially some of these resources. So this is the Marshfield Clinic site for coping in disasters and all of the information that it has for parents, children and teens, that type of thing. And then American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry has a whole grouping of different resources for everyone there as well. And then the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has a number of different resources too, and that's all linked to in the presentation. And I think that's all we have.
All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies. This was really helpful and beneficial. A lot of information there. I know we did have just a couple of questions. Jeff, do you want to ask that first one?
I do. We had one emailed in, so I'm going to read this. For kids ages 10 to 15 who are virtual learning while many friends are physically in the classroom, what are some suggestions for how to help them maintain social skills and relationships with peers in a safe way? How important is it that we prioritize this? And is there any way the schools can help? And would you encourage them to set up things like virtual homerooms to help kids maintain and develop friendships?
Yeah, I can maybe provide some input on that. And, you know, it's really important that you work with the school too on ideas. If you have ideas or if you can see that there could be a difficulty or something that your child will struggle with, just like Dr. West said, having that open communication with them and maybe having a plan with how maybe they could best cope or connect. Because I do think that's really important, especially as some are virtually learning, some might be in person. You know, we're all learning how to do this stuff together. So how to get the best results for our kids is really important, to work as a community. We're all a team here. There's some things that maybe could work, acknowledgements. So the beginning of the day, end of the day, acknowledging the students that are virtually learning. They could have buddies or work in groups, activities, games, those types of things for virtual learners to participate in. Those are ways to kind of have them connected. And then, you know, if kids have ideas too, that's important for them to share those things with their teacher, because those are the individuals that really are kind of dealing with all of this stuff, and it's new to everyone. So their input is really important too.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just one last question before we'll close for the day. So parents as teachers, so a lot of kids are going to be staying at home and having their parents help them out with being the teacher. Should they have concerns about the separation of between being a parent and being a teacher? And if so, how do you suggest they manage that?
So I'll pipe in.
Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think really focusing on, while it is a complicated situation, that they acknowledge that it may be difficult for them as well, for the parent and for the child, to really have this sort of dual relationship going on. Try to focus on self-care, which we've mentioned in the webinars as well, but remaining calm, speaking calmly to the kids, even when it's becoming frustrating for both of you, taking a break if you need to, if it is becoming stressful, and setting up some of these incentive programs that we talked about could be beneficial as well. And obviously, I know I cut Dr. Larson off, so I'll have her add on as well.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think I will pull it back to what Dr. West had mentioned in her presentation. I think having that, and it might have been Dr. Jones too, having that quality time, so the family times, that's very important to make sure that they're still getting that. So you're not just the teacher in this position. You are a parent too. So making sure that you have that quality time with them, and they're knowing that it's not just, oh, get things done and learn and regimented. It is, let's have some fun together too. Let's enjoy each other. Let's not forget that part.
All right, thank you. Just a reminder to all of our guests, this will be available on the website, on the COVID-19 page on the Security Health Plan's website. We will also email it out to everyone. Ashley will do that sometime tomorrow. If you do have additional questions, all the contact information is in the presentation. Please, we encourage you to send those in. And if you have other suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you on that as well. Otherwise, Jeff, you want to sign us out?
I think you covered it well. Thanks everyone for joining us. Again, send us your feedback and questions. We're happy to address it. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe like we're not doing anything. I'm going to see him back at